All right, this is my desktop, and I'm going to do what I normally do. So I'm going to go into my Finder. I'm going to go to my documents. I'm going to go to 619. I'm going to go and create a new folder called week 03. Week 03 workspace, just so I'm all set up. And of course, that means I now open that up, file, open folder. So I have this to work with. All right, so today we are going to talk about, like I said, loops and conditionals. And it's really important to look at a couple different things about, we're gonna start with conditionals. And the thing about conditionals is, basically it says, if this, then this. And there's some other conditionals, and we're gonna talk about those. But before we can talk about the if part, we have to understand what's in the parentheses and understand what it means by a conditional statement or a Boolean. So we talked about Booleans before. I'm actually going to pause my video here and try and make my text a little bit bigger. And I don't know how to do that, so we'll figure it out. All right, so I'm just going to create a simple file here. I'm going to call it index.html, and this will be our activity for the week, this will be sort of our text. I'm going to do my HTML document. Let me copy and paste that. So let's paste that in. Let's paste that in. All right. So maybe now I'll try and resize it. Okay, it says it's, oh look, there we go. Okay, great. So now we have bigger text. And I'll shrink this down. Cool. All right, so this is just super basic HTML page. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how we can do conditionals. So first I'll put in my top here, we're gonna use the console.log for some of this for no other reason than it's just easier. We could also do an alert if we wanted to. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the standard if statement. So in JavaScript, we can basically type, and again, I have to be a pain and line this up because I'm just weird like that. All right, so if I type if 5 is greater than 3, curly bracket, console.log, that is true. Okay, so we'll save that and we'll give that a test run. And of course, 5 is greater than 3. And what's important in an if statement is understanding what is going on here. And what is happening is this statement here gets evaluated for if that statement is true or not. There are so many different ways we can evaluate if something is true. So we can see if something is greater than, if something is less than. We can take a look at if something is equal to something else. We can take a look at if something is true or something is false. So if a variable was set to true and the variable is placed there, it triggers as true. If it's set to false, it triggers as false. At its core, you can just type if 1, do this because 1 is considered true in computers, as opposed to, and if you put 0, it wouldn't trigger because that's considered false. So what are some things that we need to check? Well, a lot of times we're comparing variables. So let's go ahead and set a variable, let the current year equal 2025. Okay, let the current year equal 2025. What could we compare? We could say, and this is gonna be really interesting because look at what I did because I'm being silly. I set this as what? What is it when I put things in quotes or put things in a variable in quotes? That's right, it's a string. I didn't set it as a number, I set it as a string. And because it's a string, It may turn into a number if we did a comparison, or it may not because, of course, it's not a number at the current state. So let's go ahead and do probably the thing you're going to be checking a lot of, which is it equal to it? So let's check if the current year, right, that's our variable, is equal to 2025. Let's do something. But here's where things get a little weird in JavaScript. We have to put equals equals. Why do we have to put equals equals? Well, it's because we are equals equals is an evaluative set of symbols. If I were to just put equals, if the current year equals 2025, it will always come out as true. And the reason it will always come out as true is because, remember, it's just trying to figure out if this sort of sentence, this equation, is true. Well, what I'm doing here is I'm actually setting the variable current year to 2025. And because I'm setting that, that makes it true in and of itself. So it's not evaluating, it's actually just executing this code. So by doing that, I'm now checking to see if this is true. It looks like it's going to be true. We're going to have a little statement that pops up that is true. So let's give that a test. Yes, let's do edge. Hello world. And we have some output right here, and it says that is true. So that's great. Now, what if I set it to, let the current year be 2026? Actually, for reality, let's keep 2025 as the current year, and we'll say, is the current year 2024? And we'll save it, and we'll go ahead and run it. That's fine. Debug anyway. That's fine. And what we see, of course, is, sorry, in the console, it says that is true. That's interesting. Let's try that again. Ah, nothing, right? Nothing was printed up because if we look at the code, we see that current year is 2025. If the current year is 2024, it would say it's not true, so it doesn't say that. Like I said, we have lots of different things that we can show as comparisons. So we might have, if my variable is greater than 4, if my variable is less than or equal to 10, if my variable equals another variable. These are all things that you can compare. You can also do the same thing with this, if my variable is greater than the number of trees, for example. I have a variable called the number of trees that can render. So we can compare variables to each other. That's really a lot of times what we're doing when we're comparing ifs. So we have all of these really interesting ways to compare numbers, to compare strings, and go from there. There actually isn't one that's super easy to say contains, so if I really wanted to compare, 20 and does the current year contain 20, that's not a simple if statement. There's ways to do it, but you have to do it some other way. So, an if statement is pretty great like that. The other thing that's really important about an if statement is it only triggers if this is true. So what happens if you want to put something else in there? So for example, it says, if this is true, These little curly brackets contain the then part of the if then. But what if we want to put something up that happens when the thing isn't true? Well, we can use a really simple thing called else. And else is what runs if the thing isn't true. Okay, so if the current year is 2024, it will put in our console that is true. Else, put that is not true. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's refresh this. We see my code, and we go to the console, and we see that is not true. So what that is saying is that my code, it knows that that is not true. All right, that's great. That's what I want. But what if I want something a little bit more specific? Like, for example, let's say that I want it to, if the current year is 2024, you can put that is true. Let's say, though, maybe we want it to else. We add a new thing called else if. That's going to throw an error right now until I get this up there. Else if, and then we can put a whole new statement in, just like before. The current year equals 2025. Put a little curly bracket. And I'm going to bring this else back up here next to it. Else if the current year is 2025, console.log. I know it really is 2025. And we save it, and we refresh it. The answer is, I know it is really 2025. And so just to give you some examples of how we can test it, 2024, save it. Go ahead and refresh it. That is true. 2023 is not 2024, so it skips this. Then it goes to here and it says, is it 2023? No, it skips this and then goes to here. That is not true. And it's important to understand this order of events. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's test it so you can see that it says that is not true. That is not true. Great. Okay. Now there are actually order of events going on here. As soon as something is rendered as true, then it stops checking and it goes into here, right? And then nothing else gets executed later. So let's look at some examples of how that will work if we want to stack if statements, meaning if we want to check if this is true and that's true, or if this is true or that's true. Let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to pause this here, and we're going to go to the next video of multiple Boolean statements.